All right, friends, we're back in Second Samuel, learning some more about David and his son Absalom. Is anybody getting confused yet with all the kids and all the people's names and the situation here? Um, these aren't ones that make it to the Sunday school stories that much, but this is a challenging time, right, for David. We are kind of realizing here that the time in the narrative where everything's going well is kind of limited. There's a lot more time of turmoil. Now, that's not necessarily indicative of the total amount of years, but the narrative, kind of used up here is substantial for that. So we started talking yesterday a good bit about Amnon and Tamar. Somebody asked me a question about the different relationships between the people and stuff. If you want to look back to chapter 3 of Second Samuel, we'll share more about David's children, some of them. So these were in chapter 3 were his sons. Only the boys are typically listed in these lists here. The sons born to David in Hebron. So that's kind of the first batch of kids. And then later on in chapter, I forget, it lists some of the sons that are born to him in Jerusalem, but I can't find it offhand. So, any case, that gives the and chapter 3 gives the list that includes the kind of the main characters of this particular time and place. So in chapter 3, verse 2, the sons of David born in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon. Okay. So we read in that story, Amnon is the one who rapes Tamar. Tamar is the sister of Absalom. So Absalom is the third child in line, right? So Absalom and Amnon are half brothers, or Amnon and Tamar are half brother and sister. And so we see, like with Absalom and Tamar, they're full brother and sister, same parents, I believe. And so there's a deeper, perhaps, connection and relationship there in his desire to avenge what happened to her by Amnon. So chapter 3 gives us some of the details, at least, of the boys in that situation. So we saw, we're flipping ahead now to closer to today's reading. Chapter 13 we talked about yesterday was with this rape of his half-sister. He lusted after her. He raped her. He didn't want anything to really do with her besides just to use her. And so later in chapter 13, that we didn't talk too much about, getting more towards our reading today, which is 15 through 17 for the day here. 2 years later, when Absalom's sheep shearer. So anyway, 2 years later, so a time elapses here before this thing happens, but Absalom has not let go of this attack against his sister. He's holding out, and he kills Absalom kills Amnon, David's firstborn. At the end of chapter 13, they get certain reports. And David thinks at first that all of his sons are dead or killed, but no, just the one, just Amnon. And David, so I'm in 13, verse 17, King David mourned many days for his son, right? His son who died. But so Absalom, in verse 38, chapter 13, after Absalom fled and went to Geshur, he stayed there for 3 years. So I think Absalom knows that it's not just his prerogative to necessarily kill the king's firstborn, his half brother. So he is resolute and he wants to do it. He does it, but then he flees away. He doesn't go back to Jerusalem, and so he's there for 3 years. Now it's only like 1 or 2 verses, but it's 3 years that elapses. And then verse 39, chapter 13, King David longed to go to Absalom, for he was consoled concerning Amnon's death. So he went through a grieving period, and now he wanted his other son to be back. For chapter 14 starts, the Joab knew, he's the king's, one of the king's commanders, generals, knew that the king's heart longed for Absalom. So Absalom comes back, but things are not ultimately going to be great. So chapter 15 is our reading for today. In the course of time, so Absalom now is kind of building up this scheme to take over from his father, really to take advantage. So this really is like Game of Thrones kind of stuff, like the kids and the whatever. Everybody's vying for power, and Absalom is making a bid for the throne. He's going to kind of temporarily, sort of, have it before his father is dead. So he's not doing what David did, waiting out with Saul. Even he's gunning for it. He's going for it. So this is interesting in chapter 15, kind of how he, it says here, he wins the heart. He takes the hearts. He stole the hearts of the people of Israel with this kind of hatching this plan. So he gains himself some people, chariot, horses. So chapter 15, verse 2, he would get up and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, that's one of the things that kings would do. They would decide disputes and complaints. Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" And he would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you." And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge of the land, then everyone who has a complaint or case could come to me, and I would see that they receive justice." So when anyone comes from these other tribes, and we see kind of this division here in particular, they would come to the king with a complaint, sometimes having traveled a significant distance, and Absalom would be there. He's the king's son, right? So he's not just a nobody. And he would say, "Hey, I'm sorry, nobody's here to hear you. I know you traveled a long way, but nobody's here to hear your complaint. But man, if I was in charge, I'd hear your complaint." Right? And so this is sort of happening, and people are then starting to think, well, maybe Absalom ought to be in charge because he would actually care about us. And of course, David doesn't know about this. People are being prevented from getting to him by Absalom. So that's the situation there. Verse 5, also whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. Absalom behaved this way towards all the Israelites who came to the king for justice, and so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. Now, at the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Let me go to Hebron." So he's been doing this for 4 years. Verse 10, Absalom sent secret messengers throughout the tribes to say, "As soon as you hear the trumpets, then say Absalom is king in Hebron." So this is a coup, sort of. It's an overthrow, and it's so powerful that it's such a threat that David actually is advised to get out of Jerusalem because his life could be at risk, right? So chapter 15, verse 16, David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, "Come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the city to the sword." So they leave. The king leaves 10 of his concubines to take care of the palace. So So David goes out over the Mount of Olives with his crew. They leave. David sends the ark back. So verse 30, David continued up the Mount of Olives. And if you know geography in Jerusalem, that helps you understand that. Weeping as he went. His head was covered and he was barefoot. All the people with him covered their heads and they were weeping too. So this is a sad, right? A sad situation. What else do we want to look at? David's cursed. So Absalom is there. He's in Jerusalem, and we're getting into, I think chapter 17 is still a situation here. So Absalom seeks advice from two different people, Ahithophel and Hushai. Hushai is kind of a secret agent for David, but Ahithophel does not give the most honoring advice. He says we should go and kill the king. He says that we should put up a tent and you should sleep with all your father's concubines, where people can see it in the sight of all Israel. So pretty nasty stuff. Hushai doesn't want that advice, and he's against that. He's ultimately for David, even though Absalom does not know that. So chapter 18 will actually be tomorrow's reading. So we'll pause on that. Chapter 18 will be Absalom's death, and we'll process a little bit tomorrow how David deals with that. Because he doesn't deal with it very well, even though Absalom is a huge threat to him. He potentially wants to take his life. So this is a darker period in the story than maybe we have thought about, and not a time period that I've been as intimately familiar as I probably should have been. So what are your thoughts about what's going on here in David's family? Questions, comments, what are you processing? Are you understanding it? Is it hard to understand? Let's do a conversation. What do you guys think? And tomorrow we'll talk about, again, Absalom's death and David's response and his return to Jerusalem. All right, guys, have a great day. See you later.